As the old quip goes, the hardest thing to predict is the future. Right? Our purpose here is not to predict the outcomes of the recent attack on Iran, nor Iran's retaliatory strikes in Israel, nor to evaluate the points of view of Americans or Europeans or Israelis or residents of Gaza or leaders in Egypt or Iran or Saudi Arabia, etc., etc. No, our goal is to take a step back and to look at some key passages of Scripture so we can gain a long view of God's purposes for our Jewish people and for the world. Doing this will help us gain perspective and peace as we live through this confusing moment of history. Again, how can a specifically Messianic Jewish view help us during this precarious moment in history? Well, we can begin by asking, what can be the results of minimizing the value of the big picture taught in Scripture while living only at the snapshot of the current moment? What's the problem with that? Well, there's a number of problems. One, arguments with no definitive conclusions, everyone fighting with each other about these kinds of specifics. Miscalculation in our understanding due to the rapidly changing situations that are occurring. You find a week later, things look very different than they did a week before. Have you noticed that before? I bet you have. Misplaced faith in public opinion shapers, leading to disillusionment and a lot of anxiety and sometimes even broken relationships. But what is the positive value of living with the big picture in mind? Well, first, let's admit that our understanding of the current moment is often distorted, at least to some extent, by the limitations of our abilities to get behind the scenes, to see more than just the threads of the tapestry. Instead, we want to see as much as possible God's beautiful tapestry as much as it has been revealed, but not just settle for a few disparate threads. Taking a step back can allow us to guard our hearts and minds, giving us a measure of shalom during this and future times of storm. This can help us avoid the temptation of saying things to others that we'll regret later. This is important, and this is critically important, and Rabbi Nathan and I talk about this all the time. This is so important for maintaining family and congregational unity both during and after tough times. So, where shall we begin? We'll start with 7 truths which form the very foundation of a Messianic Jewish view of the future. So here they are. I'm just going to go through them rather quickly, but let's see if we agree on these things. Number 1, God has made an eternal covenant with Israel, the Jewish people. This includes the ultimate promise of the return to the land of Israel. We agree pretty much? Yeah, we're pretty good with that, I think, generally. Our people, number 2, our people in large numbers thus far have not recognized Yeshua as the promised Messiah. Some of our ancient leaders were even complicit with the Roman authorities in causing his execution. But I want to point out something to you. I think it's something that we certainly agree on. But I want to point out just something that happened when I was 19 years old at one of my first Messianic Jewish meetings in Huntington, Long Island. And we were at Claire's house, Claire and Ben, elderly Messianic Jewish couple, served the best pastries this side of the Massachusetts border, just wonderful. But the teacher, there was a teacher I only heard back then, his name was Marty, I don't know his last name, and he pointed out something so important. He pointed out that, at this very dark, profoundly dark moment of human and Jewish history, when Yeshua was unjustly executed after doing only good, and we know that the story, that God didn't allow his Jewish people to actually do it. He protected us from actually being directly involved at that horrible moment. And I think that Marty was right in that this was a tremendous grace, a tremendous mercy to us as a people, that he didn't allow us to participate directly in what had occurred on that terrible Friday. Okay, we agree basically on what we said so far? We're good? Okay, good. Next, God's covenant promise to our people includes our national reevaluation of who Yeshua really is. How are we with that? Good? Yeah, I think so. The return of our people to God via Yeshua will result in great blessing for our Jewish people and the whole world. How are we with that one? We're good? Okay. 5, through the march of history, God uses both good and bad circumstances and our right and wrong responses to guide the world toward its moral and spiritual maturation. This is true in our individual lives as well as at the level of entire nations. Sound good? Sound right? Yeah? You're good? Okay, good. Number 6. I want to talk with you about the ascending spiral. The ascending spiral of history helps us follow the story. And I'm going to say a little more about that later, but basically what the ascending spiral is, and I'm thankful to the scholar John Warwick Montgomery for this insight, it's just the way the prophets of Israel worked. Events occur which are of a certain type, which then occur later on at a higher, we'll call it spiritual level. And then later on, we see a similar kind of event, which occurs even at a higher level, and ultimately everything comes together at the climax of history before Yeshua's return, or at his return. So that's the ascending spiral. And the best example, we don't have time to get into it at length, but if you read Yeshua's comments about his coming again in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 21, you'll find that it's about his coming, but along the way, as we go around the mountain, we have other events which typify what will ultimately occur. And it's all 4 Gospels, but Luke is particularly clear in this way. So hopefully I've said enough about it to get the basic idea there, and hopefully we agree on that. Okay, I think I have one more here, and that is, a happy ending to the story is promised because God simply loves humanity and Am Yisrael more than we can possibly imagine. What do you think? Yes or no? Yeah? Okay. So once we affirm these starting points, we're ready to open the scriptures. Here are some important passages. The first one is from the book of Matthew, or Matthew, chapter 23, beginning in verse 37. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you, how often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate. Wow, tough words, huh? Tough words. But important because we see the heart of Messiah for Israel. To me, that is the most important thing about this passage. It's not just him harshly judging. Him, with great sorrow, wishes that the destruction which was going to come 40 years later with the Romans wouldn't occur. But it was inevitable given the fact that we were about to not respond to our king adequately. And so, but you see his heart here. Very important passage as we try and put together the tapestry, not just the individual strands at this critical moment of history. Then we could look at another passage, Matthew 28, verses 1 through 8. This is called, again, the Olivet Discourse. You find it in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and it is his discussion of what are the signs of his coming and things that will occur before that. So Yeshua left the temple and was walking away when his disciples, his Talmidim, came to him to call his attention to the buildings. Do you see all these things, he asked. Truly I say to you, not one of stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down. As Yeshua was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Yeshua answered, watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, claiming, I'm the Messiah, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is not yet. Nation will come against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pangs. Now, of course, all of this begs a question. What age isn't characterized by nations fighting each other and famines and all this tough stuff? Well, every age is. It's been the human experience for forever, or almost forever. And so that begs the question again, well, how do you know when this is all going to happen? Well, I think it really just speaks to such an obvious intensity that it's just undeniable that that's what's going down. And so it's important to keep those things in mind. But the point comes next. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. At that time, if anyone says to you, look, here's the Messiah, there he is, do not believe it. For there will be false messiahs, false prophets who will perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you. Okay, tough stuff. And the idea of this move up the mountain through history is relevant because we see patterns emerging. And when we look at our own time, can we say definitively what period, what time it is? I don't think so. It could be just one of those trips around the mountain. But nonetheless, it helps us get a sense of things just to know that this movement around the mountain helps us keep our eye out and helps us stay centered in the midst of tough times. Now, I want to move on to another passage, and now we're in the book of Zechariah. And chapter 12 begins this way. A prophecy, the word of the Lord concerning Israel. The Lord who stretches out the heavens, who lays the foundation of the earth, and who forms the human spirit within a person, declares, I am going to make Jerusalem a cup that sends all the surrounding peoples reeling. Judah will be besieged as well as Jerusalem. On that day when all the nations of the earth are gathered together against her, I will make Jerusalem an immovable rock for all the nations. All who try to move it will injure themselves. We'll stop there just for a minute. What is operating here? There comes a time, for various reasons, all kinds of geopolitical and cultural and whatever other reasons. At the human level, there's also a spiritual, demonic, angelic thing, but we're not really thinking about that. It's not in the text here explicitly. But all these things occur, and yet Jerusalem, which has been known as the Axis Mundi. Does anyone know what Axis Mundi means? Center of the world. Jerusalem is the center of the world. And the nations of the world come against her, but will they be ultimately victorious? Absolutely not. Because God's covenant promises are sure. Now, listen to this. And I will pour out on the house of David. Oh, I'm sorry, I should give you the reference. It's Zechariah 12, just a few verses later, verses 10 through 14. And I will pour out on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication. Now notice this. This is an important passage coming up, gang. Notice. They will look on me, the one they have pierced, and will mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and grieve bitterly for him as one grieves for a firstborn son. Wow. That's national teshuvah. It's an absolute truism that in general, people don't turn back to God when everything is easy and good and fine. It's not our story, it's certainly not mine. Maybe some of you, it is your story. You were just so moved by the objective truth of Yeshua and your gratitude to God for his blessings that you turned to him. Or, of course, you may have grown up in a believing home, and that's terrific. That's the way it should be, and you have followed the Lord. But for many, and for the great national and international turning, it requires some very tough stuff. And here we have it, and here we have the nations attacking Israel, and it's tough. And we run out of options, and we have nowhere to go except to the one who loved us and loves us. And so, as a nation, we turn. We're talking not about this moment per se. We're talking about the grand arch of the story. And knowing that, we will have a measure of confidence and to know what we can know and not declaim on what we don't know as we live through this tough moment. Listen to Zechariah 13:1. It's the next chapter. On that day, a fountain will be opened to the house of David and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem to cleanse them from sin and iniquity. The great national atonement. You want to talk about a picture? This is the ultimate expression around the mountain of Yom Kippur. That's what this is about. The ultimate expression of Yeshua and our people united once for all, and the nations ultimately being defeated because of their anti-Semitism and their hatred of, demonically inspired hatred of Israel. The city will be captured, the passage goes on to say. So initially it's not so great. The city will be captured, the houses ransacked, women raped. Half of the city will go to exile, but the rest of the people will not be taken out of the city. And then the Lord will go and fight against those nations as one fights on the day of battle. And on that day, get this amazing passage. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives. Where is the Mount of Olives? Paraguay? Brazil? Bristol? No, that's right. That's exactly right. Now, we're coming to the end of our series of passages and near the end of our message. But there's Acts chapter 1, verses 5 through 10, which we need to take a look at. Let me just give you the context. Yeshua has risen from the dead. The book of Acts is the second volume of Luke wrote Luke, and then he wrote Acts, what happened, and Acts is the story of what happened after Yeshua's resurrection, beginning in Jerusalem. And this is an amazing passage. So here we have Yeshua gathered with his followers. They've come to really believe it is him. He has risen from the dead. That's not an issue anymore. Initially it was, because their minds couldn't conceive what God had planned in terms of the resurrection of Yeshua. But here they are. Okay, verse 6. Then they gathered around him and asked, Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel? Love that. They don't say, in other words, they're still thinking Jewishly. There's nothing that occurred to that point that would at all alienate them from what they understood for God, of God's purposes for Am Yisrael. They're just asking, Lord, after all this, you're resurrected. Is now going to be the moment? Are you going to walk into Jerusalem and get rid of the bad guys and establish us? Very reasonable and very Jewish question. But notice Yeshua's answer. Then they gathered, he said to them, it is not for you to know the times or dates the Father has set by his own authority. Wow. It's not for you to know. Well, if it's not for them to know, it's not for us to know either. Okay. But you will receive power when the Ruach HaKodesh comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Certain things had to happen because God's love is not limited to Am Yisrael. His love is intended, teshuvah is intended, blessing is intended for the whole created order, especially for those made in his image, people. And so our job, the job of the apostles, to reach out, and that they did. Okay, now notice this. And he said this. After he said this, he was taken up before them, before their very eyes, and a cloud hid them in their sight. This is a miracle. I believe it's historical. I think it really happened. I think the whole thing really happened. And The Nephele, that's Greek. The Anan is the Hebrew. But it's the mode of heavenly transport that takes Elijah into the presence of God. And here we see Yeshua rising, and they're looking up in the air, and they're, wow. They were looking intently into the sky as he was going, when suddenly 2 men dressed in white stood before them. Who do you think these 2 men are, by the way? Who do you think? Not necessarily their names, but, okay. These are angels, okay? Messengers. Men of Galilee, they said, why do you stand looking into the sky? I mean, it's the ultimate rhetorical question. What do you mean? Why are we looking? Why are you looking into the sky? This same Yeshua who has been taken from you into heaven will come back in the same way you have seen him go to heaven, and his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives. Okay? That's my commentary. Okay, summary and conclusions of all that we've talked about. Number 1, well, does our survey of Scripture fit the Messianic Jewish outlook? I think generally it does. There's so much more to talk about. I had to just pick passages that, there were so many more. But the general arc of the story includes the things that we laid out in the beginning. Tough times, yes, an amount of judgment, always never to punish primarily, but it's remedial to get us to change. The good news going to the world. Israel one day regathered, and the events we've talked about. Okay, so it probably does. What about the events occurring right now? Since God's purposes can include severe trials intended to help our Jewish people and the world turn to the true God and to Messiah, let's not be too hasty to celebrate any seeming military or political victories nor defeats for Israel or the nations. Our God-oriented perspective demands a level of proper skepticism about commentators on the internet making what may be premature claims about what's really going on. Or, as Rob Shaul reminds us, now we see dimly, one day face to face. Now our views are obscured by all kinds of things. So chill out, and don't be overly impressed with particular commentaries on whatever side you may happen to be on. Of course, be concerned, listen, learn, form a model that makes sense to you, but hold it somewhat lightly because there's more going on, likely. Okay, number 3, let's embrace the fact that God is full of surprises in his intentions for Israel and all humanity. For example, which first-century Messianic Jews would possibly have imagined that the return of Messiah would be delayed for 2,000 years and counting? You know what I'm saying about that? He is filled with surprises. No one would have thought it. We can suggest possibilities why this has been the case, likely having to do with the inscrutable interplay of human freedom and God's purposes, and that dynamic that operates all the time. Surprise is just part of the tapestry of life. Embrace it in the love and blessing of God. That's the message there. Number 4, the ascending spiral of history helps us keep balance. Is this particular time around the end, or might there be another? Just keep your mind open, because the ascending spiral of history is really part of the picture. Instead of overinvesting in anxiety-producing premature conclusions, we at Ruach choose savlanut. What is savlanut? Does anyone know? It's patience. Savlanut, and it's a beautiful word. It's so euphonic. Savlanut. Don't you love it? Let's say it. Savlanut. Oh, it's such a great word. I just love it. It's Hebrew for patience. In the book of Yaakov, James, he refers to patient endurance, which must be part of the Messianic Jewish experience if we're going to maintain our balance through all the vicissitudes of life. 6, since our human perspectives are inherently limited and sometimes even proven quite mistaken, let's commit to give our best attention to the things we can know for sure, the great eternal truths and aspects of practical life, which we do have a great measure of control over. That's where our hearts have to be primarily at times like this. But here is the fabulous news. God is truly good. And whatever we experience as totally unexpected will ultimately result in fabulous blessings for Israel and the nations. This we can count on. Now, 3 final words. Don't fight, play nice. The eternal exhortation of Yiddish-speaking moms to their kids. That's number 1. Number 2, a word from Rabbi Hillel. Ohev shalom, v'rodef shalom, ohev habriot, mikrav letorah. Hillel would say, be like the disciples of Aaron, or be of the disciples of Aaron, a lover of peace, a pursuer of peace, one who loves the creatures and draws them close, loves creation and draws them close to Torah. Let's be peacemakers. Very important in our families, in our congregation, and you understand the implications and ramifications. And finally, a word from the Messiah himself. Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. So, gang, in conclusion, let's allow the words of the Mom, the Sage, and the Messiah guide us through these challenging times. And we'll make it, and we'll make it together. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
In the mouths of the house of Israel, in the mouths of the people, in the mouths of the house of Israel, and may your descendants and the descendants of your people Israel be those who know your name and study your Torah, for Messiah